watch continues. Sunday evening, a beautiful evening to get out and stargaze. I'm just calling it right now. Clear skies, 22 degrees, feels like 24. By the time we reach the morning hours, 19 degrees will be the temp, and we've got a southerly flow in place as well. And the afternoon for Monday, I sure hope you've got it off. I don't, so please get out and enjoy it. 28 degrees, feels like 32. A quick look at the 7-day forecast for Montreal as well as Toronto, because you know what's going on right now? The Rogers Cup. In Toronto and Montreal, what happens to those courts if it rains? Check this out. Pretty cool stuff. However, we are not seeing any rain in the south. So that is actually great. If you're heading on out, use that hashtag share your weather. We would love to see some visuals from the Rogers Cup this year, whether you're in Montreal or Toronto. Sorry about that. If you're in northwestern Ontario, we are dealing with thunderstorms. We do have a cold front that's slicing on through, heavy rainfall, some strong gusty winds, even some large hail could be the story up in the north, and that's because of the focus of the energy as well as the way that front's moving on through. So a look at the models for the south. When's our next shot, our next chance to get that rainfall? More into Tuesday. However, off the shores of Huron, into Monday, overnight into Tuesday, that's where we could start to see some of that rainfall developing first, just because of the way that cold front drapes on down. So we are looking at a thunderstorm risk for Monday, but again, it is focused more off the shores of Huron and then set north. Chapleau and Timmins, you're in that severe possible risk just because a bit more potency within the energy as well as that front draping on down. For the south, if you do get a passing shower, don't be too surprised. We do have some energy in the mix, not necessarily a system, but if the energy's there and we do get some oomph, a little bit of lake breeze to set some of those storms off, you could have a passing shower. Some more details on your local forecast and the heat to come right now in your locals. I would love to be in the water right now. Definitely not doing a triathlon. That would be probably my worst round throughout the biking, the running, and the swimming. But nonetheless, with temperatures like this, it's pretty nice to be in the water. Toronto, 28 degrees, feels like 32 on Monday. It's going to feel like 34 on Tuesday, but there's a cold front slicing on through, so we could actually get into some storm potential on Tuesday for the south. However, in the north, that's where the focus is today when it comes to storm potential. Another low with a draping cold front, bringing that spark. There's energy in place and some moisture, so heavy downpours of rain could be seen here, and as well some hail. This is all going to be linked to the same system that moves into our neck of the woods by the time we reach Tuesday. Even Monday overnight and late evening, you could start to see some of those clouds forming towards the shores of Huron. And then as well, we do have thunderstorm risk into the day tomorrow. So on Monday, we do have thunderstorm risk, and it, again, is the same cold front. It's just taking a little longer to swing down to us in the south. However, Timmins and Chapleau, you are in that severe possible risk and non-severe in nature where you are seeing the yellow, and that's where the shores of Huron are focused there. So throughout the rest of Monday, we actually do have some energy in the extreme southwest. So if by chance we get a lake breeze set up, you could actually get some cells as well in the south for Monday for the extreme southwest. Sarnia, London, Windsor, usually that trifecta area when it comes to energy. The Great Lakes as well, the temperature pretty fair, and it is a long weekend. I'm sure a lot of us are enjoying some of these temps in the water as well. Up at Cottage Country, you're definitely experiencing the heat too. So sunscreen is definitely in the mix. How much SPF do you need? That question will be answered right now. Some more storms rolling through as well through the day today. That poor basil getting a little bit pummeled by the hail. This is where you can find me. If you use that hashtag share your weather, that's basically where you can send it, especially on Twitter or even to the Weather Network Twitter too. So across the country, we've got some weather going on, and that's good for my job because then we've got something to talk about. So let's talk about the developing headlines going on for northwestern Ontario, moving out of Manitoba. More severe potential through the day today. We do have a risk map in place, particularly more towards the north, associated with the front that's draping off of that low pressure that's situated over Hudson Bay. Heavy rainfall, strong gusty winds, even some large hail is possible where we do have the bulk of that energy towards the north, and it will start to peter out by Monday. Now, across the west, we are warming up. Heat as well in place in northern parts of BC, dealing with heat warnings. So make sure you hydrate and make sure you're never leaving anyone or anything inside of a car that could be injured by the heat for sure. So let's talk about the storms out in the Atlantic next. We'll go coast to coast, and we often talk about this, low pressure systems, warm fronts and cold fronts, and you can actually see them on graphics like this if you've got a trained eye. Let's talk a little bit more about fronts. Thanks so much, Chris. And that's what we're talking about today, actually. Cold fronts in through the Atlantic. Cold fronts are a great trigger. They just provide that lift, a perfect ingredient for thunderstorms to form. So in through parts of Nova Scotia as well as Newfoundland and Labrador. And across the board, we're still talking about temperatures that are also quite high. So the rest of our long weekend looking pretty good, pretty clear, unless you've got those storms passing on through. By Tuesday, Ontario, you'll start to see some of those storms towards the south as well, draping across Quebec. The rest of your weather story continues right now in your local forecast. And again, don't forget to use that hashtag #ShareYourWeather this long weekend. It doesn't get much cuter than this in terms of our temperature story, and I want to cover that right now. Amanda Weldon along with you, and then we're going to talk about food because long weekends are all about food, and we're a bit competitive here in Canada. You'll get it in a second. Low pressure moves across the Atlantic. We are looking at scattered thunderstorm potential, and throughout the day we've already have watches and warnings in place, so these are going to continue to change. It's parts like Nova Scotia, Newfoundland, Labrador that will be dealing with that today. Labrador and Newfoundland, you're still going to also be dealing with that on Monday. It kind of lingers around. For northwestern Ontario, another cold front that brings on that lift and that spark for storms, and that will be the story. Again, another area we have already seen watches and warnings in place. Another continuous story throughout the afternoon and evening. Large hail, gusty winds, heavy downpours of rain, all a part of this, especially when you do have this amount of energy in place, just providing that oomph for a storm to really pop up. Speaking of storms, that has been the story primarily in the west, but now it turns to heat. So you will see a little bit more of that in your weather story right around the corner, and as well a couple of icons. Now I promised we were going to talk about food, and as well, who grows it best? Let's talk about Canada and the whole country. Windsor, Ontario, one of the most prone spots in North America to experience storms. Well, Canada nonetheless, and today is not out of the question. You can tell there is a lot of lightning taking place down in Windsor and even outside London. Let's take a closer look. Even Environment Canada just releasing a statement saying, based on weather spotters and even some radar, there have been a couple of reports of a funnel cloud, but that doesn't mean that it is touching down. But nonetheless, we are looking at this one cell in particular crossing the river, some heavy downpours of rain as well as some gusty winds with these cells, and moving into Leamington as well. You may start noticing those heavy downpours of rain. St. Thomas, you're also in a severe thunderstorm warning. So no, not exactly the best time to head out and do the groceries or anything like that, but give it some time. However, these cells are passing quite slowly. We do have energy in place to support them, and we're going to see some energy move in on Monday. But let's stick with this story and head on out to Mark Robinson. Thanks so much, Mark. And as well, some gusty winds associated with that. You can see his hair blowing around for sure. And around the region, southern Ontario, we're actually quite calm unless you do have a cell over top of you. And by the time we reach into Tuesday, that's when things start to ramp up. And it's thanks to a cold front that's draping on down. First, that cold front, though, is creating a little bit of thunderstorm action in the northwest. We'll cover that in a moment's time. But here it goes. Areas like Timmins and Chapleau throughout Monday, that's where your more severe potential could be. And the non-severe around that, as you're seeing highlighted on this risk graphic. And just again, the heavy rainfall, the gusty winds, and maybe even some small hail associated with that. And then by Tuesday, that's when the south really starts to feel it. Monday, even afternoon, late evening, overnight, the shores of Huron and Georgian Bay in the extreme southwest, that's where you can start to see some storms spark ahead of the cold front making its way really towards the south. And here's where it is right now, just in the northwest, and even some energy really supporting some storms there. And we are actually into an area of some severe thunderstorm warnings. We're going to continue to track these storms, and our active weather coverage certainly continues here at the Weather Network. Your local forecast starts right now. We have got severe thunderstorm warnings in southern Ontario. We are looking at Windsor for this one, Tilbury, Leamington as well, and St. Thomas. You were just in it, and now you have been removed. We are continuing to see some of these cells pass through the region thanks to energy supporting these cells, and as well lake breezes setting them out quite nicely. So a little bit different than when we have a system move on through. We just start to see that setup pop up during those afternoon, evening hours with some daytime heating. So the main story, really the main story when it comes to these storms, is going to be northwestern Ontario. However, we are still seeing some strong storms towards the south. And this one's from a cold front that's actually bringing on some really gusty conditions, the potential of some large hail, and a lot of lightning too. But a bit of a different story, because when you look at populations, of course, the south has more people in those cities. But nonetheless, we've still got warnings and watches spreading in the south and the north. And we are seeing that front pretty defined, moving with the energy ahead of that as well. We'll start to see some of these storms forming in areas like, you know, Chapleau, Timmins, severe possible in through the day on Monday, and then widespread around those regions. non-severe in nature. And you can tell as well along the shores of Huron, that's where we could start to see some of these storms establish first. So when that system moves on through and the cold front drapes on down, it will be southern Ontario's story by Tuesday. Now we have more storms across the country in parts of Nova Scotia. We're also seeing some watches in place ahead of the storms to come in the afternoon. And again, a cold front responsible for this. Then the risk map showing off that Newfoundland as well is included in this because of the energy in place. Now we take you coast to coast, and the story in BC is actually the temperatures, as we do have some heat warnings currently in place. And then as well in the days to come, we're going to be talking about some severe weather across the prairies. Now taking you all the way back to our Ontario story, let's talk about a couple of the stormiest cities.